Okay, we are recording. Hello, folks. I am here with Ira Katz, and he has appeared before on the Meaning Code channel with Karen Wong, so some of you may have heard him there. But we want to get together and have a discussion, kind of bouncing off of my series that I did on distributism, and Ira is more knowledgeable than I am about economics, having read more widely in it. So I really am very grateful that he's taking this time to enlighten me on some things. So Ira, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Well, first, thank you for inviting me, Mary, because I really mean this, and it's something that maybe in our discussion might come to. I think you're the epitome of how real people bring wisdom into the world. The kind of wisdom that we really need, people need, like how to raise chickens. I'm serious,
Practical wisdom.
why? Yeah, but it's more than practical in the sense of just purely, I'll have more to eat. It makes what is that meaning in life and all these things. So 2 seconds, my background, I in another life, I was an engineering professor in the United States. I came to France about 15 years ago, ended up meeting my wife and staying and have a life here, doing more kind of research and development stuff. And excuse me, I'm recovering from COVID. No, I think I've recovered. Yeah, so that's another thing to talk about. And like so many people, I ran into Jordan Peterson through various sites from a more of a libertarian Christian aspect, which is something that you are interested in talking about. And from that followed Paul's channel, and then that's the first time I heard you, heard Karen, and I would say I've been a pretty much of a close observer to this corner, your corner of the internet, and occasionally participating, in the way that with Karen, and then a couple of articles that I've written at different places pointing to, I think, this very good conversation, the ones that infuse wisdom, build civilization, which is, I think, where we are at this point in time.
Right. Okay, well, very good. I really appreciate your coming on to share some insights with me. So I saw some of your writing on the Lew Rockwell.
Yeah.
Was that Lew Rockwell website, I guess you'd call it.
LewRockwell.com. So he's a libertarian who was associated with Ron Paul, and he started this Ludwig von Mises Institute, which is, again, is more of my history of where I got involved in this level of understanding, say, economics, which is a topic we might talk about directly, but also in the sense of broad stretches of understanding the world. So another topic that we touched on together in the email or the comment section is the sense of what is the history we're talking about. So that history of industrialization, for example.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? I mean, where are we now compared to where we were, and how do we know that? So that's such a fundamental important thing that you come back to over and over again. And through that kind of milieu, which I would say is revisionist history, that's recognizing that many people write history for a particular end, and it's not the end of pure truth. And trying to piece that together through through time is certainly a really important thing. And then certainly, the economics, and I would say I'm, an anti-war type person. And I just think this has been one of the great problems and damage to our country. Our country, say the American and French too, the West has been our penchant for war that's not necessary. Which really causes problems. So anyway, that's where my little bit of writing, it's not professionally at all, where I've done most of it.
Well, one of the things that struck me in your writing, you wrote a bit about Murray Rothbard.
Yeah.
And who is known, I think, isn't he known as kind of an anarcho-capitalist?
Yep, good.
Okay.
Good. Right on. You're very well connected to details.
And you were writing about him and his view of kind of like the history that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And what I found so interesting is that it seemed so much to line up with the thinking of Hilaire Belloc.
Yeah.
Whereas both of them were looking back to the period of time before the Industrial Revolution, but after, when Catholicism had really permeated society, and that the church had actually constructed a civilization based on the wide distribution of property.
Yep.
And that distribution, that wide distribution of property, then it became concentrated into fewer and fewer hands as the Industrial Revolution progressed. And Hilaire Belloc, identifies that as a core problem. And so did, for example, Bishop Fulton Sheen, who is famous for saying, own or be owned, right?
Yeah.
That our freedom is directly connected to our ability to own property, and especially to own productive property. And so, when I saw that in Murray Rothbard, I thought, well, that's an interesting connection to the Catholic thought of distributism, although he's not Catholic, from what I understand, right?
Well, I can give you a couple of details there, and maybe a little nuance,
Okay.
at least as I see it from what you're saying. Well, one is he was Jewish, though and as far as I've seen, was totally a secular Jew. And maybe not even a secular Jew in the sense of he didn't seem to identify specifically as being Jewish, say, for example, specific support for Israel or anything else. But he was Jewish background, which is kind of like me. I have a Jewish background, but it's important. But I'm Catholic, we could talk about that later or something if you want. But Rothbard's wife was a practicing Catholic all her life, as far as I know. And I think this had a great influence on him. I would say in the human way of Catholicism, a Catholic, what's the right word? Expressing, acting on that belief on a daily basis. I believe, wow, that's a good thing. That's a good thing for everybody around it. So I had to affect him. But then intellectually, of course, he was intellectually just hardcore looking for truth, as far as I can see. And what I see that was a bit different from what you described in terms of specific history of the Industrial Revolution, because it was a specific book he wrote about economic history, where he pinpoints in the Catholic Church, in many aspects, even the Jesuits, say, of the 16th century and then onward, they're finding the truth in natural law. And we can go back to Aquinas, of course. And in natural law, we find the basis of what is economics. It's the human interaction, and it's in natural law. This is the way people act. And those churchmen looking for truth and understanding the world recognize so many of the fundamentally important things about the nature of money, about private property, on and on it goes. It was there in their thoughts, and if you dig back, you find it. And of course, in the Reformation, Counter-Reformation, all these battles, especially in the English-speaking world, that was kind of lost. That intellectual history, say, was dispersed and not so well known. So this is where the one thing I found when I was reading that economic history, I was surprised to see that. It's like, my gosh, these guys sound, he sounds like a
Right.
Catholic. It's all this natural law and everything else. It was so interesting. Now, when you get to some of the details about,
I want to pause just a moment to hit on something that you said about the natural law and the connection with Catholicism.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'm talking to Michael Graney, who is the head researcher for the Center for Economic and Social Justice. And it was started by, I think, Kurland, who was, yeah, that was, this is the same group of people going back that began the employee stock option, the availability of employee stock options. So anyway, I'm going to have an interesting conversation with him, but I was on the phone with him today, and he said something. No, it was in one of his videos. He said that if something is that people will say that Catholic social teaching is only applicable to Catholics. And then he said, if something is only applicable to Catholics, it's not applicable to Catholics.
Mm.
Because it has to be based on natural law, and that applies to everyone.
Yeah.
And that's something that can be discerned by everyone, whether they're Catholic or not.
Well, if you get to the details of Catholic social teaching as in the sense of particular encyclicals that point to various aspects in the 19th century, then into the 20th century, and even now with Pope Francis, taking different views. And so, there's Rerum Novarum and Sentimus Annus and things. So I would say the one thing just historically was the church was a bulwark against communism. So had that sense, okay, you're on our side if you're on the West and things. And the other side had this aspect of the society in more general ways. So like, was it Dorothea Day?
Dorothy Day was of the Catholic worker movement.
Working movement, right? So that was there too, and obviously later was the liberation theology and these mixed things about the application. I would say from my perspective, that aspect of the the philosophical, and I would say less the theological. I'm not so nearly as strong as you are, I would say, in the theology, but that basis from Aquinas on really resonates with me, and is extremely strong and is there. And when I became Catholic, say during the pontificate of John Paul II, so everything kind of meshed together and then we were saying later, now it seems like in this libertarian Catholic nexus, which I kind of became a libertarian and a Catholic totally independently. And I'm almost kind of surprised now to see the circles where I'm reading people, we tend to come together on those issues. And probably one of the people that I think it might be interesting just to mention, because it is a blogger, excuse me, and it's who I first heard of Jordan Peterson through. In his commented later now, talked all about Paul VanderKlay and is the bionic mosquito. So it's what he calls himself, his name. But I started reading him. He was a sort of this, the aspect of understanding as a libertarian, anarcho-capitalist. That's my belief. That's what I'm writing about. And then his trajectory has been, if I interpret it, the way I see it, is, but you can't just say that and say you're going to have liberty. There's so much more to understand of the human condition, of how we live together, how we generate meaning in our lives, everything about what it means to be a human being, which is expressed in Catholic teaching. What are virtues versus sins? I mean, just think about that question and how life has changed over the last 100 years. Right. I mean, they've literally reversed. It's crazy.
Right. That's
so
right.
The sense of that, and in his trajectory is now, he almost exclusively talks about Christian history and teaching, because that is fundamental, a necessary condition to have the anarcho-capitalist libertarian society of liberty that he was aiming for from the beginning.
Okay, well
that's where they come together.
That's one of the things. So there's two things there. To me, there's two great misconceptions about the Catholic Church. One has to do with the idea of that faith and reason don't go together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I've said, and I think Pope Benedict made this very clear too, that the church is really the last refuge of human reason, because the church insists on the validity of human reason, and that we can know the truth, and that the things that we can actually come to the conclusion that there is a God through human reason.
Yeah.
Not that we necessarily do, but that we can come to that conclusion, right? And then the other, so you say the church is like a, a stronghold or the last redoubt, I think is
Yeah.
the way to say it, of human reason. But then the other thing that people think is that the church is against freedom, is against human freedom. But I'm looking at what the church says and versus what is going on in the world, especially the church versus communism and socialism, to say, no, the church is actually the fortress for human freedom. The conditions under which human freedom can be exercised are examined by the church and very practically laid out.
I would go even farther, and you could use Tom Holland's Dominion as the example, but there's many others, maybe even better to say it is, it's like the inventor of it. The whole concept of it wouldn't exist if the Catholic Church, especially, and this is the case, I like your little discussion between the Orthodox, who I've learned so much about in the last 3 or 4 years I didn't understand before, and Catholics, but that is the West. That was what the Catholic Church developed, that civilization. They could even talk about freedom. Just the other day here, it was in the news in France, has been this, it was a middle school teacher was assassinated, decapitated, coming home from school because he had tried to discuss in class the nature of political freedom and how you discuss things, and had the Muhammad pictures from the Charlie Hebdo, and it's a long thing, and he, as far as I can tell, was really careful to try to say, if you don't want to partake, you don't have to, recognizing the religious aspects of maybe some of his Muslim students. But just the one point I want to say is the whole now reaction of it from Erdogan in Turkey. There's now an international clash between the Muslim world and France and things like this, and boycott, is they use the term Islamophobe, which is like a thing made up from the West of how you would treat, think about some other group. Again, this is this Holland type of analysis that says, they can't even begin to talk about this aspect of granting religious freedom of what they're arguing for, that there's a society Islamophobic, without going totally into 1,000 years of Catholic teaching. I think that this is where it all came from, to understand those things. And you see it in those like 16th, 17th century Jesuits. We're talking about economics, also talking about colonialism, really getting at, the most powerful emperor at the time in Spain saying, no, you can't force the Indians to be Catholic, to be Christians. You can't, they're human beings, and those kind of things. The whole development of international law, it all comes from the fundamental fact of Jesus and Paul saying, we're all human beings. You can look around the world, for me anyway, you can't find the seed and what's grown from anywhere else.
So you talking about this isn't going to put you in danger of getting decapitated, is it?
I certainly hope not, but I'm not showing any of the images.
That was the thing.
Well, that's this extreme iconoclasm. You show, you can never show the image, and when you show it, then it's
goodness.
That's what there's other things too. Perhaps I'm not certainly an expert on Islam, and in France, the whole aspect. Again, it's just so ironic. Is one of the big political fights has been whether or not in public Muslim women could wear the voile, the face covering, and how liberal French people would say you couldn't do that, or more, this whole sense of, when you're allowed to do it, what's freedom, and now, but now everybody's required to do it.
Yeah.
We all have to be face covered, and we're in danger of being fined or whatever if we don't.
Goodness. Well, when you talk about this particular aspect of the question about the freedom, and rules in public and all of that. Some people are beginning to say that in the United States right now, there's a big political realignment. That what is happening is that the conservative versus liberal, and we could say Republican versus Democrat, right versus left kind of dichotomy that we've had going on for the past 100 years or so, or maybe even longer than that, that is being eroded completely, and that the realignment is between what some call the moral authoritarian left and the libertarian right. So that people are changing their allegiances if they're, so I heard Tom Woods this week talking, or last week talking to a leftist political professor who was drummed out of his university because of his some program he was doing, some class he was teaching about propaganda. And because he was exposing, his attitude was, you cannot talk about propaganda in the past. Because we all see it. I mean, you look at the Hitler, or you look at the advertising that got women to smoke or whatever, you see it as propaganda right away. What you have to analyze is you have to try to look at propaganda in your own time. And because he was exposing propaganda from the left, with the, critical race theory and all of that kind of stuff, he got in trouble in his university and got, I guess, ended up out of the university, his class closed or something like that. So now he's who was on the left is moved to the idea of the libertarian right, free speech and all that. And meanwhile, you have the left that used to be big for free speech, telling people what they can and cannot say, and really, trying to be like thought police, with hate crimes and all of that. So what do you think about that kind of realignment going on?
Well, I think if it really happens, oops, excuse me. It's just, usually Monday in the evening we have something we have to do. If it's happening, the reality of it, and if it really, and people act on it, I would think it's a good thing. I think of something, like Brett and Heather, which is another one of these.
Yeah, right.
I love them. They're just pleasant to listen to. I think I disagree with them quite a bit on things, the way they express things, actually. But it's clear that they are the kind of leftists. That I have lots of friends that I really like. You see where they have good intentions, and where I think they're wrong, we could disagree, but they're working for the good fight for whatever it is. But now, they can't even do that, with their normal thing. So even that professor, I think I know who you're talking about. I don't think I saw the particular podcast or heard it, but I think to get to things like where it's not even, you'd say some modern, typical thing, but even trying to show, teach Mein Kampf for how bad it is to get you fired, right? How could you even have anything? Well, I'm trying to show the students why it's propaganda and it's not true. No, there's so many crazy aspects that any kind of straight thinking person, say like Brett Weinstein, this other professor, or so many leftists, they're pushed out. Just the basics saying 2 + 2 is 4 could get you thrown out of the university. So there's that group that I think they would say, we've not moved anywhere. This left wing is gone somewhere.
Right.
We're just there. Now, the dichotomy you talked about, though, certainly Republicans and Democrats, I've thought for decades, I haven't voted because the things that I'm really, really fundamentally against, wars, Federal Reserve, infinite credit expansion, fundamental things like that I think are the root of so many evils. Maybe not the ultimate root, from a Catholic teaching, but politically are real roots of. Both parties end up doing the same thing. I mean, I see no difference between a Bush or an Obama or a Trump in how the Federal Reserve acts. The banks do whatever they want, they get money, independent of party politics. So how is that process anywhere addressing what I think are the fundamental issues? Zero. Now, will the realignment that you're talking about will Brat say, end up being, first thing we got to do is end the Fed? Well, I doubt it, but maybe, this craziness kind of thing where you can't try to search for truth, which is essentially what the point is. You're not allowed to question or try to find truth, even say what it is. Hopefully, there's enough people will resist that and we can make some progress.
Well, so let me ask you how, because I know that the United States had federal bank a couple of times before. So it's not the first time that we had a central bank, and it was eliminated. I know Andrew Jackson eliminated one.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened before that when there was a previous one that was eliminated.
Yeah, I think the charter ran out and it was, going bankrupt. So then was just allowed to die. So
what would happen if the federal bank, if the Fed was ended? Because the Fed is not, even though it's called the federal bank, it's not actually part of the government.
Well, again, these are the things so complicated about, where's the power is located. There's a famous story about Arthur Burns and Nixon, and how he makes policy and which way the power was running and politics. If the central bank head tells the president what's going on, or the president the other way around. There is the fundamental sense of, it was created by the Rockefeller Morgan banking interest, who were the two big competitors and still have tremendous power. And they created it and had this power to then control all the small banks and everything else. And again, this is that history of progressivism. This was taken as signed by Woodrow Wilson as president, as a progressive to reform the banks, to build a new structure. And how it's morphed since then and modern technology and everything else. The essential thing is that what would happen, what I think, the big thing that would change is the power of government would almost collapse. That's why it's fought, it never happened without something big happening, because all the wars would end immediately. The United States wars could not be funded. They are funded by the fiat, and so many other programs couldn't last. And certainly, we even can see just in immediate history in 2008, Goldman Sachs would have been bankrupt if the bank wasn't there. That terrible accumulation of wealth that we see in this small group of financiers, not even industrialists, they're financiers, follows directly from their ability to be able to gamble, essentially, to invest however they want and know they're always backed up. There was in the 80s, they called it the Greenspan put. That is, any time we start to go down, we know we'll be backed up. Totally changes how investments are made. It's why you don't have to care about labor. Who cares about labor? We have all the things, our investments always win. Really finding a true creative way of using our limited capital. For them, it's like infinite. And even now, the response to COVID, no sane person can stop the whole economy. We all die in a month. You have to keep working. It doesn't make any sense unless you have fiat money, create things and play games. And so it's a great, like a kaleidoscope. It's just totally changed reality. Again, I get back to your videos. What's real? How do we know what does it mean to say the economy? It's like I have chickens here. These chickens produce eggs. I can get meat from them. They reproduce, they recycle resources. These are real things. If I don't do them, things start to die. Things start to end. There's no production. Now nobody has an understanding of how can you keep consuming without producing?
Right, right. Well, here's
That's-
one thing I was thinking of. I was laying in bed the other night thinking about this idea of production, and I came up with an illustration. So let me just tell you, this illustration I came up with was, let's say you had an island, and on the island you have 10 families.
Yeah.
And we're going to say that the 10 families each have 4 children. So, and we'll give them each like some land and some skills, right?
Yeah.
So you've got one guy, he's got trees, he cuts them down, he makes furniture, he makes timber to give people to make houses or to exchange to other people to make houses. Somebody else has, a river running through their property with a clay riverbank, and they make bricks, and they also do other things. Everybody raises some kind of food. They have they have like a little village, and they can exchange, but they're all producing. Everyone is producing, right? And they're not just maybe producing merely things that are material. Some of them might be, producing music and singing and poetry and whatever. They have a full human life together. Yep. Okay, now let's say that some terrible, calamity happens, say some sort of plague or illness comes through. And one of the families becomes very sick and incapacitated, and for a long period of time, they can't take care of themselves. Well, if you've got the 9 other families there, first of all, they've built up capital. They have things in storage. They already have a house. They already have, maybe a wood stack in the backyard. They already have, food put away, things like that. But the other families will be able to help them. Now, if that happens to a second family, the other families would probably still be able to help them. But gradually, the standard of living for everyone is going to diminish as more people become less productive. Even if it's not their fault,
sure,
the standard of living is going to go down. The next year, there will be less capital because there will have been less things produced, less things saved over. So over a period of time, if this keeps happening, how many families can stop being productive? All right. Before the burden of caring for the people who cannot be productive becomes too overwhelming for the people who are left. But let's say another thing. Let's say instead of some plague coming through, that instead a mind virus comes through. And the mind virus that the people get tells them that instead of producing, their job is to watch over the other people who are producing and monitor their relationship with each other, right? So 2 of the families, all the people, all the grown people in that family, or the people, able-bodied people in that family, instead of producing anything, they start going over to the other families and saying, we have to watch how you're talking to each other. And we have to monitor you all the time. And you still have to support us and take care of us because we have to do this. Yep. We're going to be unproductive, but we're the human resources managers now, and we're going to make sure that you follow the rules that we make. How many of those people could there gradually be within that little society of 10 families? How many people could there be doing that before, again, you have the same effect?
Collapse. Yeah.
You have a collapse. You gradually have less and less capital built up from year to year. And one of the things is, the more you have built up capital at the beginning, before these viruses, whether the physical virus or the mind virus comes, the more capital you have, the more you can coast along for a while with the non-productive people burdening the others and them still surviving. But at some point, you're going to get to a tipping point where it's not going to work anymore.
I'm going to say something, and don't take this as an insult. You sound like a very good economist right now. And it's classic because this problem of our huge complex society to lose track of the essentials, and Rothbard, I mean, they've all done, like starting with Robinson Crusoe on the island. You know, that's where this connection between consuming and production come head to head, and you can see them. But there's no question our societies, as you know, as in the mind virus has been taught in school, because where I agree with you, the economics profession, where I believe in economics, the economics profession has been just devastated and is about trying to convince people of things that are not true. The truths that you were just expressing. You know, so there I'm with you. But where I see the great danger, you know, the ultimate danger today, to me, is that the real elites, you know, somewhere, I could guess a couple of names, but the people really pulling strings, they think we could lose production and then lose literally like hundreds of millions, billions of people that they don't think we need. And it's okay. It'd be good for the planet. You know, we have robots too. We have technology. That human capital that you're talking about, real people having skills, doing things, it's not necessary to them. And they make policies based on that kind of fundamental thinking about the world. And they have power to implement it. And that to me is the part that's the time I am in church and make explicit prayers to say, you know, help us through this.
Yeah.
Because that's different to me than, it's a kind of dystopian that I don't
Deliver us from all evil, grant us peace in our days.
Yeah, because, you know, there's no question, if you take the logic of so many lines of thought, our resources are limited. We need less people. The planet's in danger. We need less people. You know, there was a famous thing with Gates, had an equation like CO2, where does it come from? And like the big thing was he wanted to go to zero. Well, one of the variables was people. That's his logic.
CO2 is plant food.
Yeah, well, don't again, I don't want to get started. I mean, I would love the conversation about it. I could go, that's, you know, I'm a technical person, you know, I can go a long way, you know, about that whole story and several of the others. But that aspect of the fundamental thing of trying to say, the economist, you know, the basis of it is the world is complex. How do we understand this aspect of how we need to work together to produce, you know, to create more well-being? It's like you said, it's not just material things, it's music, it's other things. And for me, the way it seems to me, I've seen different terms, but to me, it seems like we're entering a post-human world. You know, there's a fundamental concept. Human beings, human civilization is a cancer to the planet. It needs to be, at minimum, pared back. This is the policies. And if you follow the policies and look at them in a total, sit back, they're very consistent with that.
Yeah, if you look at them, if you look at things, if you look at the world as a machine and the people as parts of the machine,
if they're becoming less and less necessary.
Right. Then you can start saying, okay, we could pare away this and that, and we'll get more efficiency out of the whole machine. But
it's not even the machine. It's like, what is the machine accomplishing?
Well, what is it for? What is it for? What's the ultimate purpose of the machine? If we're going to call it a machine, because I don't feel like the world is a machine. I feel like it's a living thing, you know.
And we're part of it.
And we're part of it, right? We're part of a living system. But so when you look at this, and I guess some people call them the technocrats, and I don't know if you've done any reading or looking.
Well, I think this is where it's coming, and there is now decades of understanding of a technocratic elite. Again,
right.
Who are the fundamental individuals? How is it coming together? It's much more complex. But if you say the technological elite who have plenty of resources, you know, I'll give you one small example, something like travel. You You know, those people will travel around the world and do things. They have houses everywhere. They don't have nations or anything, you know, they're somewhere. And the mass travel, which over the last 20 or 30 years, you know, again, as a person in France, you know, we're the most visited place. Everybody's here. It's probably, it's, we say it's too much. But it looks like there's been a decision that'll end. That's over. You know, just a huge percentage of hotels, restaurants, just the airlines, you know, they're toast. A decision was made, that's going to end. So when you say, well, what about those people? They don't care. For them, it's a positive. There's less CO2, there's less pressure somewhere. That will end. Now, there's so much more to talk about that one thing, about what that means, and is it good or not. I'm just saying that there has been a decision made that the humanity of those people that says travel is an enriching good thing is not in their equation. To me, I mean, that's like, I'm somebody who's totally outside of the power loop of anything. I'm just looking back and saying, these are the decisions that have been made. These are going to
And they didn't give you a vote on it.
And they didn't give me a vote on it for sure.
Right. Right.
And that decision's been made, and that's what's going to happen. If I had a little hotel, I'm dead.
Right.
A little restaurant, you know, in Paris, how are you going to exist? It's not going to continue. And it's not a problem. What they'll do is create some money and hand it out, so there's not a revolution. I mean, they're still scared of revolutions, I think. But they're making these big decisions, and that technocracy, technical elite, there's different terms, really seems like it's now's like the critical moment.
Yeah, like this is their big chance to take control.
My big hope and the prayer is they tried to go too far too fast. And that realignment you were discussing, that there are people, say like Brett Weinstein, who are going, what's going on here? This is crazy, are going to come over with, say, us, maybe libertarians, but also Christians and other people for different reasons, and say, who are these? How are these decisions being made? Are we just going to stand there in our circle with a mask on doing nothing as all this stuff is being done to us?
And then that kind of moves me into the third topic that I really wanted to talk to you about, which is what is the draw of Catholics to libertarianism, and how do you see libertarianism as working with Catholic social teaching?
I guess I would say there could be nuances between those. I just really just speak for myself, who was not didn't grow up Catholic. For me, it's I had those two fundamental aspects of my understanding of the world as separate, and where they touched, I said, well, they're not the same. And I think now over these last couple of years, and the sense of it is probably the first real touchstone is that sense of natural law, reality, reason, caring about human beings are there in both. Certainly, if we want to be moral human beings, we have to have freedom.
Right.
I mean,
so libertarianism puts it kind of puts freedom at the top. And so,
and I think at the top, and I think this is the mistake of one aspect of libertarians, only freedom there by itself has no stability whatsoever. That you need the support of a moral, natural law, you say, or again, and where that comes from a Catholic perspective is from God. And all the conversations that you've been involved in over the last 2 or 3 years about where God number one or God number two,
right?
Paul, and all those things come together to say, where our value system is there. The pure freedom, and especially the sense of, I think the big mistake where I always said I'm not that kind of libertarian is I want freedom from the violent government. I think giving that power, and I think this is where the Catholic Church historically had problems when it had real physical power was dangerous to it, was bad for it. It's not where the restrictions on freedom should be. They should be in all those aspects of subsidiarity that is in Catholic social teaching and the reality of where should be the most restrictions on any individual's freedom themselves. They should recognize they can't do everything. They shouldn't do different things. What's next? Maybe family, their church, their place of employment, their neighbors. All of those things on restricting freedom are fundamentally necessary to human society and are consistent with being a good Catholic and being, I think, being a good libertarian, that we restrict our freedom. It's not to do anything you want. That's where some libertarians have just taken the monomania of no restrictions on anything that they want to do. So as long as I'm sitting there on my lawn, anything goes. It doesn't make any difference about anything. And I think that does not bring forward a just, stable society. And so it doesn't ever happen.
Right. Liberty has to be grounded in the right understanding of the human person from a natural law perspective.
Absolutely. And that society gives some authority to, again, look at what the government is doing, why it's libertarians. They take away, all parental rights. They propagandize against it. Every little kid knows, hey, don't punish me, I'll call social services on you. I mean, it's a reality. I have a 12-year-old daughter. I mean, even here in France, you see that kind of thing. Almost anything, in terms of you can do anything you want unless the government says no. Nobody in between has any authority for anything other than the state to tell people what to do. And that's where this history has been going for a long time, when there was so much, the rebel against the parents. Well, that's not where it should have been. The parent, there's always an adjustment for that. But now they have no authority in parental care. What a disaster, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
And again, you could explain it to me 10 times over better than your own experiences, but it's just clearly a disaster.
Yeah, well, I want to wrap up. I'm going to tell you how I got into this Catholic social teaching stuff, and then we could arrange to talk another time, because I know you're getting over the virus and having coughing and.
Hopefully, I tested today for my second time. I had a test positive, and I hope today's test will show I'm negative, because I generally have no symptoms, but I have this itchy
Congestion.
cough. It's not even congestion, it's more dry, and it's when I start talking.
Oh, okay.
All day, like without a cough, and then I knew it's going to be dangerous for me to start coughing here.
Well, I'm glad you did it anyway. So here's what happened with me: is I was interested in, I knew that the church had a rich body of Catholic social teaching, and thought about economics and all of that. But whenever I would hear it, anyone talking about Catholic social teaching within the parish, it always came down to this. It came down to gathering together the adults in the parish, including many family heads, especially working men, and basically telling all of them what they needed to do for other people. And that's how it came across.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk about what the church says. Oh, the church says, support this, give to this, help these people over here, do this, blah, blah, blah. And at some point, I thought, this is a very thin kind of approach, and it seems very agendized. It seems very agendized to seeing how much money we can get out of you and redistribute to others, that sort of thing.
Yep.
So I went in and started actually reading some of the church documents for myself, and reading people like Hilaire Belloc and Chesterton, and some of the stuff from Fulton Sheen and different people like that. And I realized that this entire approach to Catholic social teaching was merely contributing to that frustration and abandonment of the church that was happening among men. Because what family head man, hardworking, tried to build up wealth for his family, goes and sits down and wants to be lectured about how he's supposed to do a bunch of stuff for other people? But that was not the first line of the Catholic social teaching. The first thing the Catholic social teaching was saying to men, I'm just gonna say it's men. It's men they're addressing. It's the man who is the head of a household, is what you're supposed to have, what is supposed to belong to you, your dignity. That was where the church started. It started there. The man supporting a family, his dignity, and what he needed to have in order to have a family.
And certainly that's also a aspect of the times. 19th century, where family, head of household being a man is assumed, for example, but we can also talk about the economics of it compared to what does that mean in 1950 or 1960 or 1970.
Right.
These are really all interesting aspects to follow along.
Well, there are dynamics to that, but I just looked at it like, if you would start presenting Catholic social teaching to people on that basis, not let me assemble you together and lecture you about what you're to do for others,
Yeah.
but start from, here's what the church wants you to have. The church is actually interested in your flourishing, in your family building wealth, in you having property, in you being able to support a family, in you having the means to educate your children. That's where the church starts, with the dignity of the family and the head of the family and that work. And it's, so then I had done this series of talks with some people in my parish, not in my parish, but with some people, friends of mine in my parish. And I called it Catholic Social Teaching as You Have Never Heard It Before. Starting from that basis, here's what the church wants you to have.
What, again, I don't want to get you, this is maybe a long conversation, but I certainly have read some stories, or articles, of the interests of how like Catholic social services in the United States was a particular aspect that was captured by a particular ideology. And that's the part that forcibly took over what had been a parish, say, how do I help this parish have more well-being? And what does that mean in terms of economics compared to some ideological view of the world,
Right.
and how these people fit into that ideology?
Well, Michael Graney, who I'm going to talk to tomorrow, has done extensive research on how, on what happened to Catholic social teaching and how it was distorted and perverted through the 20th century. And I'm talking about the depth into which he goes, going and finding letters of people to one another, letters from, say, like this Catholic head of a university to this politician to this person.
Oh, that'd be really interesting.
Really detailed, way more than, I mean, it's hours and hours of stuff that he has. I want, you'll be interested in listening to him when I talk to him tomorrow. But he has, and I'm going to put, when I talk to him, I'll put some links. I'll put it under this video too, of his series on socialism and how socialism crept into Catholic social teaching. And the way that it distorted things, which I think ends up with this sense of frustration that people can have, and I would say especially men with the church, when they look at it like, where's the support, where's the sense of the dignity of a husband and father in the home, and the sheer work. I mean, I am just astounded as a woman. I'm astounded when I look at men and just how hard they work. It's like
it's everybody now.
What?
It's everybody now. The whole economy is so distorted.
It is, but I mean, I'm not
No,
saying
I
women
see your
don't work
point.
hard.
It's very good.
Women, I'm not saying that women don't work hard, but the
Yeah.
women are not the ones building the bridges. They're not the ones maintaining the roads. You know, this really, you know, whole body work that men do to keep our civilization going. And the lack of appreciation and understanding for that is just, it's just horrible, you know.
Yeah, I wrote a little article about one of the things this year, just a little thing on gratitude. You know, thinking of, I would say poor little Greta. You know, she seems to have no sense. She lives in the first world that, you know, there's all this stuff being supporting you. You know,
Right, right. Yeah.
have some appreciation for it. You know, if it went away, you know, things
If
you
it
could
went
see.
away, you would die, you know.
Yeah, it's very quickly.
We-
And I think the sense of with men, you know, maybe is that weight that the church or humanity places, at least on that traditional family of, you know, you have to be there, you're supposed to be there, holding all this up.
right.
And that means supporting women and children up there in a way of higher than themselves. It's like an atlas, you know, holding it up. And if you know, to keep whittling away at that that work that you're describing, you know, undercuts our whole civilization. I mean, and I think again, that's where we are. That's what we have to be talking about. That's, you know,
Right.
Paul VanderKlay's estuary. That's these conversations of,
Yeah. So how many families on the island now are producing?
well, you could say those things like in the United States, like the bottom 50% don't pay any taxes. You know, and the top one, you know, 0%, they don't really pay taxes. They're net government, you know, printed dollars positive.
Right.
That's what's squeezing everybody out, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah, no, I could keep going a long time, but
I know.
really
Well,
enjoyed talking to you.
I enjoyed talking to you too. We'll have to talk again. I
Yeah.
hope your cough improves.
Yeah,
And
no. Next time, it's no cough. It's almost
next time, no cough.
yeah.
We'll count on it. Well, God bless you and thank you so
Yeah.
much. I'm going to stop recording now.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.